Well, greetings and thanks for joining us today. Another episode of Lightbulb Moments. We're glad you're with us today. Thanks for spending some of your precious attention and time with us. We appreciate it. Whether you're listening to us live or listening to the podcast or the YouTube channel, we're glad you're with us. Shout out to a couple of our sponsors, Lightheart Sanders, and then also Zenoti, who helped make this forum possible. Well, I'm glad to be with you today after a couple weeks off the podcast. We had the 4th of July week, and then I just got back from a bit of an extended trip to the Oregon coast, and then that led us up to Alaska. So just got back from Anchorage last night, but I'm glad to be back with y'all. It was good to have some time off, and I'm excited about being with you today. We do have a guest with us today from London, Minter Dial. I spoke to Minter yesterday. We had a prep session, but he hasn't joined us yet. Hopefully he'll be joining us in a couple minutes here because we've got some interesting topics to discuss with y'all. Meanwhile, one of the things that is probably very top of mind for everybody, and I'm going to do a little bit of a pivot here, and why we wait for Minter, or if we reschedule with Minter. Certainly there's a topic that is on lots of people's minds, and that has to do with the new law, OBBB, also known as the One Big Beautiful Bill. And we will be inviting Lightheart Sanders to give us a more comprehensive understanding of the tax implications of this bill, which are substantial. I do have some notes for you I'll share with you in the meantime. This bill also has some significant changes as it relates to business exits. So in particular for this audience, that's really the scope of what we will cover, is how it relates to, from a financial standpoint, limited to taxation and succession planning. So as a general rule, as it relates to business exits, there are some new ways to actually save on taxes with this bill. And without getting too deep into them, it does make it easier, and there are higher limits for family transfers. And for very, very small transactions, a very small transaction would be, at least by the general universe of succession planning, under $1 million would be very small. And so these favorable treatments for family transfers probably won't make too much a difference to the average member of our community, because it's only the limits really set in a very high dollar amount. So even though this would be considered to be a favorable change, it probably won't impact most people because it's for larger transactions. Certainly, the bill has better write-offs for equipment and improvements. And that is something that includes business exits and tax. There are also some bigger deductions for S corporations and LLCs, which is about 95% of the companies we work with in the professional beauty industry are either LLCs or S corps. There are some favorable things for those organizations. And then some of the other ways that it relates to succession planning and favorable tax treatment, again, is really restricted to more high-end type transfers. So kind of bottom line on this, without doing a full review, and I'm not going to play tax expert with you today, but most of these changes as it relates to business exits are probably a non-factor for many of you, because the limits are, it really is for larger transactions than most in the professional beauty industry, because the professional beauty industry is primarily made up of what's known as micro businesses, and a micro business is under 5 million in revenue. So now as it relates to tax changes, certainly there's quite a bit that relates with tips. And I'm going to go through some of these things with you right now. And ultimately, Lightheart Sanders did a great job of summarizing. So I'm going to refer to some notes that relates to, they call it the top 5 changes from the that their tax department feels impacts the beauty industry. So number 1 is new tip deductions for employees and tip credit for business owners. So beginning in 2025, beauty professionals, including stylists, estheticians, nails techs, will be eligible to deduct $25,000 of reported tip income annually on their individual tax returns. And this applies to tips reported through W-2 wages and is available for tax years 2025 through 2028. Now, a bit of a commentary in there. I mean, that suggests that there's actual reporting of tip income. And what's interesting is this is going to have some consequences as it relates to reporting of tips. And the other thing that nobody's really talking about, but it's in the back of my mind, is that it will result in some certain sources of income being tilted more towards tips than non-tips. I mean, if you think about it, if you have some more tax-free income that would come from tips, the devious mind would be, lower your price and have higher tips. Anyway, just kind of throwing it out there. And then this is the big one. And after about a 30 or I don't even how many year attempt to have a FICA tip credit, which has only been available to restaurants to this point, which has been a big thorn in the industry's side since, again, 30 plus years. Salon and spa owners who pay FICA taxes on tip income in excess of the federal minimum wage can claim a federal tax credit for the employer paid portion of those taxes. So what that means is for those businesses that are tip compliant, where they're actually paying payroll taxes on tip income, they'll get a credit that could have a significant or a meaningful impact on profitability. The credit, I won't get into all the specifics around that, but so those are just, and I'm going to summarize a couple more, and I see Minter has joined us, so I'll welcome him just in a moment here. The other things that really came out of this bill had to do with overtime pay. Super interesting on this one. Employees in the beauty industry receive overtime wages, such as assistants, front desk, et cetera, can deduct 100% of their qualified overtime compensation for the next 3 tax years. Wow, that's interesting. Then a couple other things here before we bring Minter the conversation. There's also some deductions that were known as qualified business income deduction that's been made more permanent. 4th point is expanded expensing for equipment, building, and improvements. So this is bonus depreciation. And then finally, increased state and local tax deduction, which had been removed and has now come back starting with this tax year. So anyway, definitely worth a deeper dive with your tax professionals to really see how these changes affect you and your business. Several of these changes relate to the individual taxpayer and several relate to the business taxpayer. So anyway, with that, we'll move on. So today's podcast, we have joining us from London as a three-peat, Mr. Minter Dial. How are you, Minter? It's good to see you today.
I am thrilled to be here. I can't believe that we're having another fun chat, Tom.
Well, you always provide some stimulating conversation, and no doubt you will today. So thanks for joining us today, Minter. And I love your screen because it just screams of all these books that you wrote, And then you sneak in this thing, the joy of paddle, which we're going to unpack that one a little bit. I learned about that yesterday. I had no idea that was going on. Always something new with you, mentor. Always something new.
Well, I have to say, just before we got on air, I spent 2 hours with three members of the Ukrainian army, all three of whom are wounded veterans, and all three of whom are bona fide artists in their own right. And they've converted themselves from, let's just say, wounded veterans to, they created a thing called the cultural forces, which exposes their singing and musical talents for the purposes of moving people and especially motivating and energizing the troops on the front line, and then going to places like London and the United States to galvanize support for their cause.
Wow. Now that I feel like we could unpack that one. And that just is a random, not a random, just another day in your life, huh, mentor?
It's remarkable how these types of meetings remind me of what's important in life and how to do stuff that matters. It's deeply energizing.
Yeah. Well, there's some of the things that we talked about in the past. And, to give you a proper introduction, you're a speaker, you're a podcaster, you're a writer, you're an entrepreneur, you get into a lot of different projects, and you throw in a few curveballs at me, like coming to Burning Man. So you got that coming up. So some of the things that we talked about in the past is a subject that you've gotten into, which now you have two editions, and that's artificial empathy, which of course artificial intelligence has been on everybody's mind. But your first edition of this was like 6 years ago. Is that right?
Yeah, 2017. I got the first edition out when, way before all this new LLM stuff. And it was just almost a thought experiment. Is it possible to humanize AI and use it and do it through empathy? That was the first idea. And of course, then stuff happened, and AI just took a vortex change pivot through the LLMs.
And how has your point of view pivoted on that as you've seen the reality emerging with more and more AI and digging dap? I guess it was 8 years ago, huh? You wrote your first book on that. So how has your understanding changed on that?
Well, fascinatingly, the shift in AI was a first element, but the bigger thing was actually COVID, because what that did is that shifted a lot of people and societies' perspectives. And so when you put those two together, what we ended up with was a very sick world spinning, and having this idea of AI, the revolution of AI falling upon us finally, having gone from a long winter into this new sort of explosively interesting space. And the area that had been of particular interest to me was about the idea of humanizing AI, putting empathy into AI if possible. And where that sort of crossed into was, how can we create better therapeutic AI, where we have AI that can be therapeutically useful and have empathy. And that became all of a sudden a much bigger topic as we went through and after the COVID.
It reminds me of a recent experiment I had. This isn't, or not experiment, experience, and this isn't directly related with AI, and it's not even directly related with empathy, but I'm compelled to share it with you. So we spend the month of March in Austin, as we did this year, and there's a lot of driving vehicles down there. Certainly a lot more than where I live up in Minnesota. And I was at an intersection, and there was a crossing. I needed to get to the other side of the road. And cars went back and forth, back and forth, and back and forth. And here comes this self-driving vehicle. It was the only vehicle to actually stop to allow me to cross the street. So all of these vehicles that were driven by actual humans just passed by, and I was just waiting for a break in the traffic. And here comes this self-driving vehicle, slowly glides to a stop, and I'm able to cross the street. So I do believe that programming is so important as it goes into AI, and the whole empathy piece is super interesting. Let's spend a couple more minutes there, okay? What, as none of us are really necessarily, well, I would say none of us are AI programmers, but I guess we are AI programmers now. And we literally can program our own AI channel. And so, is there anything else you want to cover before we move on to a couple other topics?
Well, I don't know if we're necessarily programmers, but we certainly are all AI prompters. And what I think, I have a sort of a general philosophical rule, which is be open to AI, explore it, because we can't put the genie back in the bottle. So if you haven't gotten into exploring it, try to bring with it an open mind. Why? Because I think we tend to be very critical of that which we do not know, like doubt or foreigners, and becoming more aware of it and more aware of its possibilities with an open mind, more likely to get beneficial results. That doesn't mean that you should count on it blindly or think it's all beautiful, but go into it and be a little less critical. We have a tendency to hold AI and a few other things like politicians and psychedelics up to higher standards than we hold ourselves. And it's a good opportunity to reevaluate that type of paradox in how we approach things. So there's a lot of exciting things. AI has become an integral part of my life. I don't rely on it, and I certainly don't rely on it blindly, but I find it hugely interesting and a great reflection on who we are as human beings.
And looking at your bodies of work, of which there's a lot of bodies of work that really represent what you've done and accomplished, it's quite impressive and it's quite diverse. And I think what you would really suggest is that meaning and the need for more meaning in life, and that you always talk about that. I mean, that seems to be a theme that's permeated a lot of your work. Is that a fair statement?
No, it's more than a fair statement. It's 100% correct, Tom. In fact, I believe, and I haven't necessarily been 100% intentional in this, and it's not like I've got to do this every time, but it is a thread in every one of my books. I have this book about meaningful communication. The first chapter of Future Proof is called Meaningfulness. When you lead, what's interesting is how to lead, first of all, yourself, and add more meaning into your life. Artificial empathy was about trying to make a meaningful use of AI, especially in the therapeutic AI. And then of course there's the book about my grandfather, which, let's say, has been highly meaningful to me. So, and it all reflects probably a need to increase more meaningfulness in our lives, my life. And I highlight the work of John Vervaeke, who will shortly be on my podcast, who has written an amazing tome on the crisis of meaning, how we are living in a period where there is a dearth of meaningfulness in people's lives, which means that we are in a society that is suffering, that has an element of sickness in its lack.
So what do we do about that?
Well, first of all, we've got to be aware of it. And part of the problem is that we're all intelligent and we have a general idea of our lives. We have a general idea what meaning is. But if you ask us, what's the purpose of your company? There's still a lot of people who are going to say, the purpose of my company is to make money. And so be it, to make money. But how are you actually making the world a little bit better? You might be solving some person's specific issue or problem, and therefore you can have a bigger purpose. But it's too many people that find meaning in empty things and therefore struggle with finding their lives full. And it doesn't take much more than have a conversation with a man who has just lost his leg and has shrapnel that's still deeply embedded in his lungs and the side of his body, who's now dedicated to singing, to remember what actually is difficult and what really is meaningful.
This is a Ukrainian gentleman that you're referring to then. Yeah.
Absolutely. He has this gorgeous voice. He still has trouble singing because he has a punctured lung. But oh my gosh, we could do with a little perspective of what actually is important in life and how to orient a little bit more of our lives to doing something more meaningful. And so being aware is the first real big thing, Tom.
You talked about, you used the term the avatar trap. All right.
Yeah.
That may not be directly related to meaning, but what's the avatar trap?
Oh, it's entirely related. So the Avatar Trap is the name of my work in progress book, not been published. It is my hope to get it finished by the end of the year. And the Avatar Trap is the avatar is a metaphor for the types of masks that we carry, and more specifically, the disassociation or the lack of real representation of what we present of ourselves and who we really are. So it's the gap between what we're presenting, the mask, the avatar that we use in digital profiles, how different that really is from who we are. And if I could just elaborate on the avatar itself, which is why I use it in the title. So the avatar is a word that pretty much everyone is aware of, right? Everyone has an idea of what an avatar is. Reality, though, is, Tom, that pretty much 100% of us have the wrong, in fact, the bass-ackwards understanding of what is an avatar. So an avatar in today's world, I'm thinking most people are going to suggest, it's a little thing you put up on your profile, as opposed to putting up your real picture. You might put up an avatar, and you can choose between it has more hair or less hair. Typically, we choose to have more hair, Tom. We're in the hair business. So we have more hair, we make ourselves look better and take the wrinkles. Let's get rid of a few of those, make my avatar look a little better than me. And so the avatar is a better version of me, aka not the same or the real version of me. And the avatar also can live on. We're mortal. The avatar is some digital. As long as electricity and the internet was around, we'll continue to live on. And yet the avatar that we're talking about is 100% the wrong interpretation from what it actually means. Because the avatar is a term from the Hindu religion. And an avatar in the Hindu religion is a mortal, imperfect version of God.
Oh.
So whereas we tend to sort of godlike create immortal, better, if not perfect versions of ourselves through these avatars, in reality, it should be the entirely reverse. And this idea of godlike, narcissistic, self-ingratiating, self-centric type of world that we're living in. That's the type of avatar we have today. And to believe, here's the trap, to believe that that is my reality is part of the gap. And that gap is actually what makes us sick. Because one day we will wake up and fall flat on our head as we understand that, oh my gosh, we are actually imperfect, mortal beings. And if we're not embracing our mortality, we're not embracing our true reality, that gap can be very dangerous and difficult to live with.
Wow, I get it now. I mean, we touched on that briefly during our prep call, but I understand where you're coming from. So instead of an idealism and this idea of perfection beyond reality, the trap and the reason why you talk about being asked backwards is that it should be the opposite, be more of a humble version. It should be a version that is, you use the Indian tradition here. And so I'm trying to formulate another word to describe it, but I get what you're coming with, where you're coming from with that. So this is a book that you're working on in process then?
Yeah, and to just to riff on that one piece, it's also very attached to this notion of consciousness. And without being woo woo, because I really not woo woo, but I do think that we should have a way bigger dose of humility. And part of that humility is understanding that we are actually completely imperfect people. A second part of it is we really aren't important. Really, we're here for a little speck of time to do a little speck on some earth and put things into perspective, as in, as my children are the best. Well, they're the best for you, but let's put that back into perspective. We're just here for a little short time, and be of service to others, be of service to the community, do something useful in that way, not just about you, yourself, and maybe your tight family. Doing things for family is great, but that's just an extension of you in my mind. Being of service to your community, being of service to your city, and even to your nation, as these good soldiers that I was just talking about have been. Now that is meaningful.
You remind me of a quote, which I think it's attributed to Thomas Carlyle, and I'm going by recollection, so which is always risky, but one life, a little gleam of time between the two eternities, reason enough to live well. A little gleam of time between two eternities. Yeah.
There's a another my priest I met about a couple of years ago said to me, "We are the dash, a dash between the date on a tombstone. Our life is just a dash. It's between the date we're born and the date we die, and it's just a little dash."
I'm gonna write that one down. Our life is just a dash. Wow, you've got a lot of great ways of putting things, which I appreciate. All right,
Well, that was given to me.
So let's get on to another topic, which I was very intrigued with, and I shared with you one of the reasons I was intrigued with it, and that has to do with the concept of play. And so in boiling down the topics for you and I to cover, I think we discussed meaning and then play. So let's get to play for a moment, which, as I mentioned to you when we had our prep session, you wouldn't have known this, but we just had our May conference, the Phil, where play was the theme. And and the theme played out very well over the 3 days.
So to speak.
What's that?
It's so to speak. It played out very well.
Yeah, I caught myself after I said that one. Thanks for catching that one. Yeah. Including having Mia Sundstrand from the National Institute of Play, who the nonprofit that was started by her grandfather, Dr. Stuart Brown, which JP on our call, who and Michelle, who both are on this call, were very familiar with Dr. Brown's work. And it was a bucket list to even have a conversation with Dr. Brown, but to actually have him and that nonprofit represented at our conference was really super cool. So, but you, of course, are going to have your own take on the state of play and reinserting play into life and how that relates to meaningfulness. So let's spend a little bit of time talking about play.
So why this is an interesting combination, meaning and play, is that meaningfulness can get all sorts of heavy and serious. Because, I've got a broken finger. All right, well, it's a pain. It's going to bother you, but it's not a big deal. Put things in perspective. So I tend to think of meaningfulness on a scale, and there's little purpose, little meaning, and then there's big meaning, big purpose. And as soon as we get into big purpose, it sounds like everything's oh so important and oh so heavy. And I think that's why it's also particularly useful to have play, because I'm a big believer in and having a little fun in life, having a sense of humor, going out and playing. And I specifically think that play is a glue for trust, or at least a catalyst for trust. So what does that mean? And I use the words of Jordan Peterson, who, paraphrasing him, suggests that a couple that has no more play in its couple is not a couple that will last long. Because it is in the moments of play that you get to go down on your knees, if you will, become childlike, a little vulnerable, and learn each other at a more naked level. And of course, I'm talking metaphorically a lot about these types of expressions, but play, and in business, you've got to do business, you've got to be pragmatic, you have to deliver, sure. But if it's all about being serious and there's no play, there are plenty of expressions around this, but that doesn't sound like a lot of fun, Tom. So I am I've been exploring and researching how important play is in a business environment. In certain creative fields, it's sort of more obvious. You know, you're playing music or something, or you're listening to music. But so many businesses get so wrapped up in the performance and in this almost existential need to survive, they forget the value of play. They think of it as a waste of time. And yet, as my experience with paddle tennis, which is where the joy of paddle comes from, is that if you encourage play, you encourage to meet each other at a different level. You on the paddle court in particular, which is like a little tennis, you play in teams, and because the ball is live, you can't hide your feelings when you hit a really great shot. Ah, you feel good. Or you hit a really doozer bad shot. Oh, bugger. And you know, it comes out of you. Your emotions can't be hidden. You no longer have the mask on you. Mm. And in those moments, you're showing yourself to your others. And in those moments, you are connecting. You're showing that you are fallible. You make mistakes. You are human. You have emotions. You're not some sort of automaton that is always perfect, always on the money. So just like Brene Brown says, you know, the notion of vulnerability, and play is a great way to bring out vulnerability and allow for you all to meet, even if you're business people, in a more genuine manner.
Well, that's a good segue over to the joy of paddle. And we that was a surprise when I talked to you, is that, you know, that's very top of mind for you. And you've actually started, you're writing a book on it. I mean, I didn't see that coming. And the Joy of Paddle company, which it looks like if you read your LinkedIn, you started in January, but it's obviously you've been playing paddle. And you'll have to describe the difference between all the different types of paddle sports, which I'm going to turn over to you. But so let's set the stage for that. What is the Joy of Paddle? What is paddle? What is paddle compared to like paddle tennis and all of that? And why does that matter in terms of your bodies of work, that you're putting so much time into that now?
Right. So I have to start, I think, with what is paddle. And paddle is how we pronounce it in Spanish, padel. As well, it's a sport that's been around since 1969. And it was typically a very niche sport. It started in Mexico, became popular in Argentina, and then southern Spain, and basically, essentially lived there in those three spaces for 30 years. Then in the 90s, it started becoming more popular. They rendered it more professional, and it became more of a thing. So paddle tennis is a sport that is Hispanic by root. It's essentially a mini tennis. if you think there's a net in the middle, your bat is more like the head of a tennis racket with a little handle, as opposed to the long handle that a tennis racket has. The ball is very similar to a tennis ball. It's a little less pressurized, but has a little bit more fur. And you hit it over the net. But the difference is, much like squash, you have a wall behind you. And essentially what that means is that if you hit the ball hard at me, I don't need to hit it right away. I can let it go by me, bounce, hit the wall, and come back towards me. And if you're able to anticipate that, as hard as you hit it at me, the more dangerous it's going to become to you, because I'm now back towards you, having it come back off the wall, and I'm ready to play it into you, and you're standing right in front of me. So hitting hard no longer becomes the only way to win, which is really how you win in tennis. And the notion of paddle is that it's a game that you play in twos, and it has an enormous amount of tactical and counterintuitive components to it. So bringing all that into the joy of paddle, 3 years ago, I decided that I wanted to spread the joy of paddle by doing a podcast. And there's a statistic which is pretty strong, which is that 92% of anyone that has tasted paddle will become addicted to paddle. So it has an addictive quality. And just to compare or differentiate it from other paddles, to your question, there's paddle platform tennis, which is the game played in the Northeast, usually on snow, which is on a raised platform and has lots of similarities. The ball is a little bit more like a lacrosse ball. The rackets are a little bit different. It's played with cage netting as opposed to walls. And there are other nuanced differences, but there's a similarity to the game. But because it's a caged netting as opposed to walls, the bounce of the ball is very different, and it's not quite as easy as paddle, the one I'm talking about, PADEL as opposed to PADDLE. Then there's also California pop paddle tennis, which is more like mini tennis for real. There's also paddle boarding that people get confused on, which is when you get on the sea and you use a paddle like an oar to row around. So those are the more confusing elements of PAD paddle tennis versus the others. And finally, the notion of my company, which is the Joy of Paddle Company, and this is, along with my book, answers to what I think are the problems of our society. So on the one hand, I am trying to bring more meaningfulness and somehow reality, to the further point, into our lives. And I also think we need to have more joy in our lives, more play. And paddle, because it's played by twos, because it's played in a closed environment with all four of you, you're naturally more communicating with everyone on the court. Because it's new at this point, you can come and meet all sorts of different people. In our divisive world, that's a great idea. So even if you're a Republican or a Democrat, even if you're left or right, you can play paddle and have union on the court of paddle. And there's 5 rules to paddle that I often talk about. Rule number 5 is the most important one at this juncture, which is after paddle, beer. So you have to reserve your time on the paddle court, and good etiquette says you reserve a good half hour to have at least one beer with everyone with whom you played, opponents included. So that way we're enjoying paddle. We're not enjoying winning or losing. We're enjoying paddle, and we're being together. And that, Tom, was a very long answer to your question.
No, it's great. And I love rule number 5 is actually allocating time and reserving it, because most people just dash off to what's next in life. And so, allowing that time for both sides to gather and, keeping the true spirit of this is a game,
Yeah.
It's a game, and it's a game that should be enjoyed, and not something that needs to be fit into a, tightly woven schedule. Of course, pickleball over here has taken over the country, and it is just amazing how many people and how many courts are coming up. So certainly paddle related sports is very popular with us humans.
Yeah, no, there's certain crossovers with pickle. My suggestion is that pickle is a great sport, and it has the merit of bringing so many people out who've never done sports. Uh, Paddle is a more challenging sport than pickle. It's not as challenging as tennis. It has the advantage of being very easy to start. However, it becomes very difficult to get good. And so that eternal challenge, the eternal learner challenge, is a beautiful element of paddle. I've been playing for 51 years, and I still feel every time I go out there that I have something to learn.
Nice. I love it. Minter, you're such a great guest. Thanks for joining us today. We've been talking about getting you back part of the podcast for probably 4 or 5 months. Let's everybody give him a virtual round of applause. Hopefully this will get to you. Do you have these? Have you
I
received these?
do. They're
Okay.
actually not on my desk right in front of me. They're around the corner, so I
No,
can't grab mine.
I just want to make sure that it crosses the ocean okay. So
They do
listen,
indeed, and never broken.
enjoy Burning Man. I'm super curious to see pictures of that. You at Burning Man will be super entertaining. So thanks again for joining us, Mentor. Again, let's give him a virtual round of applause, and we'll see you next time around. Okay.
Been a
And
great
I'm going to
pleasure.
get
Thank you,
over to
Tom.
London. I was supposed to get over to London at the beginning of June this year, and we were going to be part of one of your epic salon dinners. And so I want to still hold a seat at the table when my wife and I get over there to see you. Sound good?
Count on it. Yeah, count on it.
All right, my friend. Have a great rest of the summer, and we'll talk soon.
You betcha, Tom.